Okay, so ready to dive into something a little different. We're talking locksmithing today, cracking open RoleCatcher's career guide on this one, and honestly, I'm kind of surprised.
Surprised in a good way, I hope.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, I always thought locksmithing was, pretty straightforward, but this guide is showing me there's way more to it.
Right. It's a lot more than just keys and picking locks. People tend to have this, like, Hollywood image of it.
Exactly, like sneaking around in the dark with a little pick. But the guide mentions things like installing electronic systems.
Absolutely. It's become a very technical field. We're talking high-tech security, biometric scanners, the works. It's not just your grandma's lock and key anymore.
So it's not just about being good with your hands, but also understanding all this tech.
Exactly. And the guide even talks about locksmiths giving security advice, almost like consultants.
So they're looking at the whole picture, not just individual locks.
Right. A good locksmith can spot a weak point a mile away, whether it's a door, a window, or even just, like, bad lighting.
Okay, now you're making me paranoid about my own place.
It's all about being proactive. But seriously, the guide does a good job of highlighting the varied work environment. It's not your typical office job, that's for sure.
Yeah, I was picturing more of a make a spare key for your grandma kind of vibe, but it sounds way more hands-on and unpredictable.
Absolutely. One day you could be working in a fancy office building, the next you're helping someone who's locked their keys in their car at 2 a.m.
Speaking of which, the guide mentioned something about job security and locksmithing. Something at a 4% growth rate?
Yeah, from 2019 to 2029, which is pretty decent, especially these days.
Makes sense. Everyone needs locks. But like with any job, I imagine there are good and bad parts. What does the guide say about the pros and cons of being a locksmith?
Well, on the plus side, a lot of locksmiths are self-employed. They set their own hours, which means a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, that makes sense. Especially if you're doing emergency calls, you'd have to be pretty available.
Exactly. And there's also room to specialize. Like, you can focus on antique locks or high security systems, or even something called forensic locksmithing.
Forensic locksmithing. Okay, now that's a new one. Sounds kind of intense.
It is. It can involve legal cases, insurance claims, stuff like that, like figuring out if a lock was picked or forced open.
Sounds like you need to have a good eye for detail.
Definitely. But there are downsides too, of course. It can be physically demanding, working in all kinds of weather.
And dealing with stressed out people who are locked out, I imagine.
For sure. You got to be good with people, even when they're not at their best.
Patience is a virtue. The guide also stressed the importance of safety and ongoing training, which makes sense. You'd be working with tools in sometimes risky situations.
Totally. And the world of security is always changing with new technology and all that. You got to stay up to date.
Yeah, it's like we were saying earlier with the electronic locks and cybersecurity, not just about picking locks anymore.
Exactly. It's a field where you're always learning, always adapting.
Sounds like it takes a special kind of person. So someone's listening to all this and thinking, hey, locksmithing might be for me. Where do they even start?
You know, it's one thing to just talk about career paths in general, but I thought the example profiles in this guide were really cool. Gives you a feel for what it's actually like to be a locksmith at different stages.
Yeah, I love that kind of inside look. So who do we meet first on our locksmithing journey?
We start with an entry-level locksmith. The guide emphasizes their attention to detail, which makes sense with all the precise work involved. They're assisting more experienced locksmiths getting comfortable with the tools and procedures.
So still learning the ropes. What kind of tasks are they typically handling at that point?
A bit of everything, really.
Hmm.
Installations, repairs, even those emergency calls, though they'd always be with a more seasoned locksmith.
Definitely a learn by doing kind of situation. Remember those certifications we talked about? Is that something they'd be working towards at this stage?
Yep. The profile mentions they're studying for the Certified Professional Locksmith exam, which shows some real initiative.
Always good to be ambitious. Who's next on our list?
Next up is a junior locksmith. This locksmith has a few years under their belt, comfortable with both mechanical and electronic systems. They're ready to tackle more on their own.
So they've graduated from apprentice to like independent contractor. That's a big step. What kind of responsibilities do they have now that they're not being supervised all the time?
They're handling a wider range of jobs, rekeying systems, installing electronic access control, stuff like that. And it's not just the technical stuff. They're interacting with clients more, explaining things.
Yeah, that client interaction is crucial. You got to make people feel comfortable, especially when it comes to their security.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this locksmith, in particular, is highlighted as being really good at explaining complex stuff in a way anyone can get.
No more tech jargon. I like them already. They're
Yeah.
really hitting their stride at this point.
They are. And they've earned that Certified Professional Locksmith certification, which definitely adds to their credibility.
Like a stamp of approval. Okay, time for the big leagues. What about a locksmith at the top of their game?
Now we're talking about a senior locksmith, decades of experience, seen it all, done it all. They're the go-to expert for those really tough security challenges.
This is who you call for Fort Knox. What sets them apart from even a really skilled junior locksmith?
It's the combination of experience and leadership. They're not just masters of the craft. They understand security systems as a whole, designing solutions for big projects, overseeing teams, mentoring newer locksmiths.
Passing on that hard-earned wisdom, I can see how valuable that would be, especially with all the new technology coming out all the time.
Definitely. And the senior locksmith is totally on top of all that. They see technology as a tool to enhance security, not replace those core skills.
They're not just keeping up, they're ahead of the game, and I bet they have that certified master locksmith designation.
You bet. Years of dedication and learning to get to that level. It's the peak of the profession.
Really impressive. Okay, so someone's inspired by all this, wants to get started. What does the guide say about taking those first steps towards becoming a locksmith?
Hands-on experience is key. They really push apprenticeships, learning directly from the pros.
Makes sense. Nothing beats that real-world experience.
Exactly. And they suggest connecting with professional organizations like the Associated Locksmiths of America, that kind of thing.
Networking is key in any field. And what about in this digital age? Gotta have a good online presence, right?
For sure. And that's where RoleCatcher comes in handy. They help locksmiths build strong profiles, connect with potential clients.
It's all about getting your name out there. But even with all the skills and connections, there's still the job interview. What kind of questions should aspiring locksmiths be ready for?
The guide has a whole section on interviews, actually. Covers a lot of common questions.
Oh, perfect. Hit me with some of those locksmith interview curveballs.
Be prepared to talk about what got you interested in locksmithing in the first place. They want to see that passion.
So, I like keys isn't going to cut it.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Think about what truly fascinates you about the field.
Right. Show them you're in it for the right reasons. Okay, what else?
Be ready to describe a time you had to solve a tough problem, maybe something unexpected. They'll want to hear about your process.
Like a real-life lock-picking puzzle?
In a way, they want to see that you can think on your feet, come up with solutions.
Resourcefulness. Okay, I gotta ask about the emergency calls. I bet those are a goldmine for interview questions.
Oh, for sure. They might ask how you deal with someone who's completely freaking out because they're locked out of their car at night.
Talk about pressure. What are they looking for in an answer like that?
Empathy, for one. Staying calm, being reassuring, even when the situation is a mess.
Because sometimes a calm voice is the best tool you have.
Exactly. It goes beyond just the technical stuff. It's about being a calming presence.
Makes you think about the ethics of it all, too, which the guide mentions. I mean, with all this talk of picking locks and stuff, there's gotta be a strong ethical code.
Absolutely. Locksmiths often have access to people's homes, businesses, their stuff. Trust is huge in this field.
It's a big responsibility for sure.
It is. And potential employers want to see that you're not only skilled, but also trustworthy. They might ask about situations where you were asked to do something unethical.
Like if someone tried to get them to break into a house.
Right. You need to have a strong moral compass and be able to stand your ground. Okay, we've talked a lot about the practical side of locksmithing, but the guide also has a whole FAQ section. Gets into some interesting stuff.
I'm a sucker for a good FAQ. What kind of deep dives are we doing in there?
It covers a lot. Basic tools, different types of locks and systems, even the history of locksmithing, which is surprisingly cool.
Really? Okay, now I'm intrigued. Give me some of that historical locksmithing trivia.
Did you know locksmithing is one of the oldest professions out there? It goes back thousands of years. The ancient Egyptians had wooden locks, and the Romans made crazy, intricate ones out of metal. Works of art, really.
Wow, I had no idea. It's amazing how long people have been trying to keep their stuff safe.
Right. And the FAQs do a nice job of tracing that whole evolution, from those ancient locks to what we have now.
It's like a constant game of cat and mouse, security evolving alongside new threats. So, without giving away all the FAQ gold, any other burning questions that stand out?
One that comes up a lot is about owning lockpicks. It's kind of tricky. The legality depends on where you live and what you plan to do with them.
Yeah, makes sense. You don't want just anyone walking around with those skills.
Exactly. It's about using that knowledge responsibly.
Speaking of, what about the classic scenario someone locks their keys in their car? I'm guessing there's more to it than just jimmying the lock with a coat hanger.
Oh yeah, there's definitely a technique to it. The guide talks about locksmiths using things like inflatable wedges, long-reach tools, even a method called slim jimming, where they manipulate the lock through a tiny opening.
Sounds like you need steady hands for that.
You do. It's why it's so important to hire someone who knows what they're doing.
Definitely not a DIY situation.
Oh,
So the FAQs sound like a great resource for anyone who wants to really dig into the specifics, but we've only scratched the surface here. What else is coming up as we continue our deep dive? We've covered a lot of ground here, from picking locks to picking careers, but what about the future of locksmithing itself? Any crystal balls in that RoleCatcher guide?
they actually do touch on that. We talked about how electronic locks are becoming more common, right? Well, they see that trend going nowhere but up.
So are we heading for a world where every lock is digital, no more good old-fashioned keys? Will locksmiths need coding skills more than lock-picking skills?
It's not that simple, thankfully. While those high-tech systems are definitely on the rise, biometrics, smartphone access, all that the guide makes it clear that traditional skills are still in demand.
It's like, even though we have ebooks now, people still love the feel of a real book. Some things just can't be replaced.
Exactly. And that's where the real opportunity is for locksmiths who can bridge that gap. Knowing the old ways in the owner of tech, that's going to be valuable.
The best of both worlds. But it's more than just the tech itself, right? It's about understanding how to secure those systems, because with every new gadget comes a new way for someone to try and break in.
100%. The guide actually gets into cybersecurity quite a bit, which makes sense. Our homes, businesses, everything's getting smarter, more connected, more points of vulnerability.
It's like a whole new world of security challenges.
Exactly. And locksmiths are in a great position to be the experts on that. They could look at the physical A&D, the digital, figure out the weak spots, and recommend solutions.
Like security consultants for the 21st century.
That's a great way to put it. It's not just about being a technician anymore. It's about being a problem solver, an advisor.
Someone you trust, which brings us back to the ethics we were talking about. You're really relying on your locksmith to be a stand-up person, especially with all that access they have.
For sure. And the guide really stresses that. Locksmiths are often in people's homes, businesses, dealing with sensitive stuff. Yeah. Integrity is non-negotiable.
You're not just unlocking a door, you're being let into someone's life, their livelihood. Big responsibility.
Huge. And potential employers get that. They're not just looking for skills, but also for someone they can trust completely.
Someone who'll do the right thing, even when no one's looking. It's more than just a job, it's a commitment.
Well said.
This whole deep dive has been really eye-opening. Never thought I'd find locksmithing so fascinating, to be honest. It's got history, it's got technology, it's got that human element of trust and responsibility.
It's a hidden gem of a career, no doubt.
Absolutely. So, for anyone listening who's feeling inspired, RoleCatcher's got your back, right? They have resources to help people explore this path.
They do. Training programs, job boards, all that good stuff. And don't underestimate the power of just reaching out to local locksmiths directly, maybe even finding an apprenticeship.
That hands-on experience is irreplaceable. Plus, you never stop learning in this field, which honestly sounds pretty great. Always a new challenge, a new skill to master.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, on that note, we'll start wrapping things up. Big thanks to RoleCatcher for the amazing guide, and to you, of course, for lending your expertise to our deep dive.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
And to everyone listening, whether you're considering a career change or just love learning new things, keep exploring, keep those brains engaged, and who knows what hidden talents you might unlock within yourselves. Until next time.